Hello, welcome to the first of what may end up being several videos about the four-color hack in which I attempt to explain the rules. I figured a video every now and then might be more interesting than large blocks of text. I mean, in theory. So four-color hack. Very good. The role-playing game of collaborative superhero action. And you can see here on the whiteboard, I have names and powers listed for three different characters. The first one, Magma, is the character run by my friend Terry in our Penance campaign. Magma is, well, obviously a fire-themed character with flaming fist, control flame, and resist damage when magma is on fire. With magma manages, if magma's put out or isn't currently on fire, well, then she doesn't have any of that stuff. And then I have the powers listed from two characters, two villains rather, from the rule book. Chimera, who has precognition D10 and transmorphism D10, and Fission, who is one of the rulebook's heavyweights with two D16 powers, his atomic energy form and matter transmutation. And what I want to look at in this video is how splitting a die, a power die, can be used to create static effects, right? So I'm looking a little bit more at static effects. So let's start with Magma. Magma, as you can see, has control flame. So let's say Magma wants to create a wall of fire. And she could do that. She's on fire herself, and she has control flame. There's no good reason why Magma shouldn't be able to control the fire that surrounds her body. So in order to do this, what Magma would do is she would split her control flame D10 into 2D8, for example. And then one of those D8 would become a wall of fire. Okay, so she would end up with wall of fire, 1D8, and control flame with 1D8. So this temporarily reduces both the power and the flexibility of her control flame power. But the advantage is she's now got a wall of fire. And that wall of fire is a static effect. It will remain in play until Magma chooses to get rid of it, or until something narratively happens that could explain why the wall of fire is no longer there. For its game purposes, the wall of fire, all right, let's back this up and let's look at just the wall of fire D10. The wall of fire D10 would have a protection against relevant effects equal to half the maximum value of the die, and the maximum value is 8, so half of that is 4 plus 1. So it would have 5 protection, and then it would have 1 to 8 hit points. Okay, and it would be vulnerable to attacks that you could reasonably expect to affect a wall of fire. So if a character had, control water, they could, put out that wall of fire using that. Or a super strong character could clap their hands, creating the shockwave, not a sock wave, that would be a completely different power, a shockwave which would blow out the fire, etc., etc. In terms of the wall of fire itself, it would cause damage based on its die. And if Magma were using the wall of fire offensively, it would also take into account her base damage for her ranged damage. So she could use the wall of fire offensively, describing how she controls the wall of fire to move, etc., etc. So that's a fairly simple example, I think a fairly simple example. Now let's look at Chimera. Chimera is a little more complicated as a character with his transmorphism and his precognition. We're going to ignore the precognition for now, and I'm going to focus on the transmorphism. And let's say Chimera's a shapeshifter, right? And let's say he wants to have a more battle-ready form. And since his origin deals with Greek mythology, let's say Chimera wants to turn into a Minotaur. That seems like that could be sufficiently offensive, perhaps on more than one level. So Minotaur. So first thing he's going to have to do is he's going to have to start to split that D10, right? So the first time he splits his D10, he gets 2d8. But let's say Chimera wants 3 powers out of this, okay? And he can't get 3 powers with 2 die 8, so he's going to split another one of those die 8s, which will leave him with 1 die 8 and 2 die 6. At which point in time we can start to assign these to abilities that seem appropriate. So let's say that when he's in Minotaur form, he has enhanced senses, D6. He has great strength, D8, and he has a tough hide, D6, which in this case would give him 4 points of protection. Right now, these are static effects, but they're not static effects like the wall of fire. It's not immediately obvious how these could be undone. Right? I mean, I guess if a hero had the ability to cancel magic or something like that, we could certainly try to figure that out. But in this case, Chimera's just using his transmorphism to gain additional powers at lower levels. Which it's his shtick. That's what he does. He changes form to fit his situations. So these static effects, I wouldn't need to worry about how many hit points the static effect itself has, or anything like that. Not really like a wall of fire. Okay, but does give Chimera a wide range of potential abilities. Again, depending on the narrative, and then sticking within the limits of his concept. So, for example, Chimera doesn't, turn into supercomputers or things like that. He modifies his body into other organic forms, and sticking with his shtick, preferably those based in mythology, because Chimera. I mean, fairly obvious there, I think. Now we get to Fission. Fission is a seriously powerful character for a villain, and his background, his powers originate from his scientific genius and whatnot. So different scope here. We're not going to worry about his atomic energy form. We're going to leave that intact, and we're going to say, I'm looking at my notes over here on the side of the screen, we're going to say that Fission is going to use his matter transmutation two different ways. All right, so if for the first effect, let's say that Fission has a whole bunch of mooks working for him, right? He's a Doctor Doom style villain, doesn't like to get his atomic energy hands dirty if he doesn't have to. So he operates through minions and mooks and whatnot. So he's got his mooks, and the heroes are bursting into his lair, and Fission wants to arm his mooks with something a little more substantial than, a handgun. It doesn't seem like that's what will carry the weight to carry the day for Fission here. So what he's going to do, let's say he's got 4 mooks, and he wants to arm each one of them with a blaster rifle. So he is going to use matter transmutation, basically to transmute thin air into blaster rifles. Why not, right? It's a comic book. So matter transmutation starts at a D6, and he needs 4 dice because he's got 4 mooks. So the first time he does this, he gets 2d12, and then if he splits each d12, he gets 4 die 10. So there we go. So now he can hand off those blaster rifles, so to speak, to each of the mooks, right? So each mook gets a blaster rifle D10. that's pretty powerful. It's going to have a nice kick to it, and so on and so forth. Got a good range. We're going to be doing some good damage here. Now, in this particular case, since this is a static effect, what I would want to do in this case, and perhaps in the case of Chimera and the Wall of Fire as well, I'm trying to avoid dictatorial rules. This is the way it must be done. Trying to avoid that. But in this case, with Fission creating multiple weapons and handing them off to mooks, I would at this point in time assume that each time the blaster rifle is used, because this is a power being used for the benefit of another character for all its intents and purposes. So each time the blaster rifle is used, roll to see if it downgrades. Right? And this simulates the blaster rifles losing power. Right? They're running out of blaster energy or whatever. So mook number 1 blasts magma with the rifle. Whether the mook hits, does damage, whatever, roll a d10. If it comes up a 1 or a 2, that mook's blaster rifle downgrades to blaster rifle d8. Becomes a little less effective. And also note at this point in time, Fission has all of his matter transmutation power tied up in these blaster rifles. And I mean, that still leaves him atomic energy form D16. So that's nothing to sneeze at. But that said, he did just give these blaster rifles to mooks. The mooks probably aren't going to last too long in a fight against superheroes. Mooks aren't supposed to last too long in a fight against superheroes. That's, you know, kind of what they're for. So after this, Fission wants to hit the heroes with something a little more substantial. So at this point in time, he uses his matter transmutation on one of the unconscious mooks, because at that point in time, the unconscious mook is basically just a plot element. Doesn't, you know, serve any actual function except for narratively speaking, which, you know, is an important function, but there it is. Mook's not doing anything. He's just unconscious. So Fission is going to matter transmute the mook into an atomic monster. And at this point in time, he's still going to need to split his die because it's a lasting effect. So let me back this up a little bit. So his D16 is going to become 2D12. And that's as far as he's going to go. And now the unconscious mook turns into atomic monster D12. And so as an atomic monster D12, it would have 7 protection, and 1d12 hit points. Kind of a pretty tough effect here. And since the atomic monster is basically at this point in time an element, it's almost like another character, you slot the atomic monster into the initiative order, right? So add the atomic monster to the initiative order. Give the atomic monster a card and have it act as if it's a character. It's a very simple character, but it's a character nonetheless. And during this time, Fission still has matter transmutation D12 to work with, because he only used one of the 2 D12s to create the atomic monster itself. Gives Fission a little more versatility as he continues to try to keep the heroes from thwarting whatever his evil scheme is. So I guess that's really it for this. The bottom line is, with these lasting effects and the way the rules work, is keep in mind, oh, my display got messed up. Oh, well, that's okay. That the rules aren't really rules per se. They're guidelines. It's your game. Come up with a way to do things that is at least semi-consistent, that the players, that the other writers, and that you as the editor can come to count on, and just work with it. And if it turns out you come up with a better way of doing things than I've come up with a better way of doing things, by all means, please let me know. That would be good information to have. And that's it for this video. And thank you very much. Have a good day.